All right, well, the Wild bounced back in a big way last night. They throttled the Blues 6-2. Kaprizov with the hat trick. Eriksson adds two more of his own, and the Wild dominate in front of an absolutely rocking home crowd in a must-win to split the series before heading back to St. Louis Friday. So let's bring in our Minnesota Wild expert now, Seth Toupal from Locked On Wild. Check him out for all your daily Wild coverage and on Twitter at Seth Toupal. And Seth, I want to start here first. Sam came on Tuesday after that brutal 4-0 loss to the Blues and said he was a little disappointed they didn't roll with the hot hand Cam Talbot behind the net in game one. And I got to be honest, I tended to agree with him. Then I was downright shocked after that performance. They were going to roll with him for the second straight game, but that's why I know nothing, and you're the expert, Seth. So tell us what you thought of that decision first off when you heard the news yesterday morning and why ultimately it worked out so well.
You know, I was very surprised because my thought would have been to go with Cam Talbot too. You look at what he did over the course of the end of the regular season with an unbeaten streak well over a month. That would have been my pick, would have been to go with him to start game one. But obviously, Bill Guerin got Marc-Andre Fleury for these types of games. And so you roll with him, you end up losing 4-0. Dean Evason said after the game, we don't feel like these goals were Marc-Andre Fleury's faults. It was lack of rebound control in front of the net. It was lack of being able to keep the Blues from setting up camp right around the net. And so Evason felt that if they could correct those things, that Marc-Andre Fleury would look better in the net. And he did in game two. It comes down to something that Dean Evason has done all season, where he has really stuck by his lineup, stuck by his guys, and trusted that they're going to be able to make the corrections themselves, as opposed to making big lineup changes, you know, switching goalies out after one game. He has very, by and large, stuck to his team to be able to make adjustments and come out and play better. And the things that let the Wild down in game one were cleaned up nicely. And you get a really nice 6-2 win. And you go from, oh boy, here we go again, to feeling really good going into the St. Louis portion of this series.
Seth, hopefully Freezing Cold Takes didn't listen to yesterday's show, because I was stupidly hoping the Wild didn't get any power plays early in that game. I thought it only served to lower their confidence and sort of create tension. What do? They go 2 for 2 in the power play in the first period. Was there anything you observed differently about the way they approached the power play last night?
Well, it seemed like overall the team did a much better job of crashing the net. They got stuck a little too much on the perimeter during game one. And yes, they did have more shots than the Blues. But you look at the quality of the shots, they're not great. They're coming from, you know, the top of the zone, from the edges. And so the Wild did a much better job in game two of getting players around the net to just feast on those rebounds. Ville Husso got the shutout, but he left a lot of pucks out there that had the Wild had players around the net, they probably would have been able to cash in on. And so that became more of a focus here in game two. And as we saw, they were able to just feast on some of those loose pucks and definitely took advantage.
Seth, we talked about injuries playing a bigger factor headed into the playoffs and in game one than maybe most fans realized a few days ago. Now both teams seem to be a little bit banged up in certain areas. I guess just how do you feel right now heading into the rest of the series, given where both teams stand on the injury front and maybe not being 100% healthy? And how do you think that may impact specifically game 3 Friday?
This is where the test of depth comes in. And I feel like if you look at both teams, the Blues with their injuries are kind of trending downward coming into game 3, losing a couple of blue line players that really helped them out in game 1. For the Wilds, the big one obviously is Matt Dumba. You don't have to be an elite hockey mind to see that he is definitely not 100%, but he's going to continue to just grind it out. That's the type of player that he is, the leader that he is for this team. He's going to give what he can on the ice. And you look at one of the biggest differences for game 1 to game 2 was the grief line, I think, looked way more like they did during the regular season. And that includes Marcus Foligno, who I think needed a game just to kind of get back into the swing of things after that knee injury, get more comfortable. And so I think the Wild are trending in the right direction injury-wise, with the exception of Matt Dumba. Other than that, they really have about as healthy of a lineup as they've had since any point of the regular season.
Seth, let's talk more about the grief line, just because I like saying grief line. They explode last night. Eriksson Ek, 2 goals. Busy night for him. 2 penalties as well. Has a hat trick. Has it wiped away. But in the end, gets the last laugh. Eriksson Ek specifically, tell me where he has grown the most this season.
You know, it's been just in building off of the offense that he added to his arsenal last year. And he was a guy who was a great defensive center, was a pest to play against. But any goals you would get from him were a positive. And came in last year, had 19 goals and started to show some of that promise. And going into the season, we were wondering if that was going to be a mirage or if that was going to be something that would continue to trend in a positive way. This year it did. He had 26 goals and gives this team a great option on the power play. And I think the biggest difference in this series is that you look at the Blues and they've got 3 lines that can score very well. And the Wild had the Kaprizov line and the Fiala line. We know that those guys are going to score. The Grief line, their expectation was that they were going to be the defensive line to shut down one of the opposition lines. If the Wild can continue to get scoring from that line, that I think is a spot where they can really turn favor of this series to them. And if they can build off of this Game 2 performance, that's going to play huge, especially on the road in an environment that is going to be very difficult to play in.
Wild leave Minnesota with the series split, all tied up at 1 game apiece. They head back to St. Louis Friday to play the Blues in Game 3. Puck drop 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on TNT. Rest assured, we'll be back here Monday morning to break it all down. He's our Wild expert for a reason. Seth Toupal bringing the heat. Check him out every day on Locked On Wild. Seth, thanks so much for coming on, man. Hope to see you again real soon.
Anytime you guys need me, I'm there. Looking forward to what should be an electric Game 3.
And people have to check out Seth and Kevin Gorg in the postcast as well after the games. Good
yes.
stuff.
Seth bringing the heat per usual. Sam, I really was intrigued about what he said about the decision to start Fleury again in Game 2, despite maybe what we thought a big surprising move yesterday morning we found out on the show. Any big takeaways there from Seth?
Yeah, obviously the goaltending was a huge talker going into the day. We thought they might switch to Talbot. They stick with Fleury, and they get paid off with that gamble. I think I'm more intrigued about that Grief line because, like you mentioned, you've got your Kaprizov, you've got your Fiala. You don't always have that third scoring line. Well, Eriksson Ek has emerged to become this legitimate kind of third scorer on this team. Greenway adds the physicality. Foligno adds just a little bit of everything and that leadership and the captaincy. I think that's one of the most fun lines to watch. And apparently that's the line that Dean Evison wants defending the Tarasenko line for St. Louis too. So they're maybe the pivotal line to watch in this series. If they can score and defend like they did last night, then the Wild have a great chance.